Welcome back to the Succeed Against the Odds show. Today's episode is going to hit close to home, especially if you've ever been in a relationship where something felt off, but you couldn't quite figure out what. We're diving into the story of someone I will call Sara. Obviously, that is not her real name to respect her privacy, but her story is one that is so important to share. Sara lived through an abusive relationship and bravely made the decision to leave. As she shares her journey, I'll be pointing out some of the red flags that were there all along, those little warning signs that so many of us have been taught to ignore or excuse. Sara didn't even realize that some of them were red flags until we talked about it. And that's why this conversation matters, because the more we are aware, the more we can empower ourselves and others. Now, here's the part you don't want to miss. I dig into one particular red flag that research shows is the biggest predictor that an abuser might eventually escalate to something even more dangerous. This is heavy stuff, but it's something we absolutely need to talk about if we're going to break the cycle of silence and bring about real change. So grab your tea, coffee, or your favorite beverage, get comfy, and join me as we dive into Sara's story. Welcome, Sara.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. I'm actually very happy that you've come forward wanting to share your story, because it's very important that we share our stories so that we let other people know that they're not alone if they're experiencing similar experiences, if they're with someone who's treating them in similar ways. Also, our stories help people recognize what is not okay. So you don't have to be in an abusive relationship to want to listen to this. You can learn from this so that you don't end up in an abusive relationship. So, Sara, how did you meet the abuser in your life?
It was actually very authentic, old-fashioned way, grocery store, and actually my birthday. So I was very empowered. I was feeling myself, had done some self-care, really, really excited that day. That day was really actually a turning point for me. I was, turning a special age, and I just really was so excited to celebrate that day. That day was amazing. And the gentleman, I'll call him this gentleman, he approached me and it just took off from there. I was praying to God for someone who had emotional maturity, who was stable, mentally, physically, financially, and that was all of what I thought I had. And I had already been out on my own. I had been already stable with the career. I had my daughter, my little one. She is very well taken care of. So there was really no fears, no struggles, no mental anguish. Hadn't been in a relationship for a long time. I was very celibate, actually. I practiced celibacy. So, what they say, I was out, and I guess I caught the eye of him. And so from there, it went to just quickly. I was quickly a fiance. I would think within 3 weeks, that was the case. I get it. The gentleman had a military status, so that's what they're used to. They're pretty proper when it comes to engaging in relationships. So I appreciated that. I appreciated that I was thought of as a future wife. And for me, I was just being the woman in the relationship and doing what I thought was best, committing to someone. And, I even got the permission of my mother. My mother was even giving me the permission to do so because in the African culture, you have to get permission from your parents. So as much as I could involve her, I said, hey, do you think this is a good idea? She was all on board, and it just kept going from there. Went to my first African wedding. It wasn't mine, but I was invited, me and the gentleman, and I felt like that was an inspiration. I felt like I was next. I felt at the time safe. I felt on top of the world. I was able to start several businesses. on top of being able to have my little one involved. She was following right along with mommy. I really put my focus in family and him. And it got to the point to where eventually I started to lose myself um, mentally first. I remember the first breakdown that I had. I was going through a court case from work, and I needed support. And we were living together at the time. I was sitting in my office, and I was just feeling so down. And this is the first sign I realized, this might not be the best relationship for me. I confided in him and I said, "Hey, I am going through so much with this case. I'm feeling like it's all worthless. I'm feeling like, everything is against me, all the odds are against me. What should I do?" And at that time, I don't know if it was something, automatic response, but I was told by him that I needed to be in therapy and that I needed to just let it go. For me, it was such a big deal that I didn't understand why I was just pushed to go to therapy. So I listened. I listened like the good girl I was, right? So I listened. I got a therapist and I faithfully started to talk to my therapist. And I tell you, something clicked. Um, I feel like after the third session, this is when everything started to change in the household. Um, I would be having my therapy sessions at home. At the time, it was coming a little bit out of COVID. So he was, wandering about in the house because he had to work from home as well. So we were working from home together. And it was a moment when I was expressing a very traumatic experience in my life that after I hung up with my therapist, he switched on me. He switched and I couldn't understand because he was the one who told me to go to a therapist, which I didn't know I needed at the time. But at the end of the day, what was said was that I was weak, that I didn't need to really tell anyone about my experiences. Um, I could be your therapist. I am your therapist. I am your pastor. I am your father. I am all of these things. And if you don't comply, that was the wording. If I don't comply, then I'll be stripped away from really everything: finances, housing, resources. And I had been codependent at that time because I was really looking forward to marriage. That's just how I think. So,
Was he listening
oh yes, I I didn't know that. And I even invited him into the sessions because I felt like we had a little bit of relationship problems, but I was badgered because of that. I was so afraid to ever ask again for him to join therapy with me that I never even thought about it. And it hurt my heart. Like my heart is actually throbbing right now thinking about it, but it hurt me because I've known people to go to, you know, counseling with their significant other. Um, to me, I feel like it's a stigma that's put on my culture. The African culture doesn't believe that therapy is a need. So I'm very happy I did that. I'm very happy I broke that stereotype, but in the way that it happened, I'm not okay with not having my privacy. I'm not okay with being judged. And that was the beginning of it all. I stopped going to therapy and I'll be real. I'm gonna be real. I'm gonna be real. I started to indulge in other substances. I started to smoke a lot of marijuana. And that is where I knew something was going on. Because even though I had the energy and I was able to get up and do what I had to do and get going and do what I had to do, I'm like, this is unusual. like I'm unusually doing this. It's too much. I had already been a medical recipient because of I had an injury in the past, but I indulged in it because I had started to feel like I needed to escape. I couldn't call my mom. My mom actually, she kind of thought I was doing fine. So I didn't really tell her much of what was going on with me. Again, the substance was what I would run to. And it scared me because I started to delude and forget about what was really happening in reality. So I would forget him. It wouldn't matter if I had plans to perform or if I had plans to travel out, let's say to LA. I would go, have a moment, smoke, and forgive him, even if he was to embarrass me. I had a moment when we were in public, and for me, I'm a very private person. I don't share my intimate relations. So I was invited to his church. And I had been going to church before we met, but I didn't have a church home. So I said, being a woman, I'm going to come to your church and I'm going to support you. And a little bit down the road, I had got very busy. I'm a mother. I get busy. It was nothing personal. But at that time of we traveling and being busy, it created a bitterness between us. And this is what really hurt me. He was offered a position in the church, and he confided in me about it. I let him know. I said, you should do it. You should take it. You should do it. You deserve it. You've been in the church. You dedicated so much time, money, energy, sweat, and tears. Take the position. So I was very supportive. He declined it on the strength of me. And I said, no, don't do that. And what I was told, because I felt like I should have been there, was that he didn't mind having me as a girlfriend. He basically told the church, I do what I want. We're intimate. We live together. And there's no marriage nowhere, no time soon. I was so humiliated. I have been working so hard to keep my own self together, my reputation, my family's reputation, that it just discouraged me. I was so ashamed. I never even went back to the church. Then people are looking at me on the streets like, so I was a part of that. That's not what I wanted. I never wanted that. So it was those type of strategic things that I just didn't realize were a part of the abuse. And so those were individuals who I could no longer feel comfortable reaching out to if I needed help at all. I had built relationships up for him to break them right back down. And it was shameful. I didn't ever go back, never volunteered. I disappeared. And the biggest thing that actually really did make me leave was one day. This is one day where I had been in LA, just came back from LA, just did a show, and I was with my brother, my blood brother, my twin brother, okay? So look, I'm with my brother and we're heading back. And I knew there was something because I would always have to text him where I was, when I was, how much money I was spending. I mean, receipts, here's a screenshot. Every move that I made had to be recorded or documented. And this one time I didn't do it. Just this one time I didn't do it. It got bad. So I get back home and my vehicle had had some issues. And so I said, I'm not going to go to John, Billy, and Joe down the road when I could come to my man. I said, look, can you please fix my car? I didn't get a response. So I pull up and I'm like, haha, I'm happy to be back home. I'm actually happy because I can ground myself. For me, I like to travel, but also like I'm a homebody. So I actually was really excited to share what I went through, all the people that I've met. And I walk into the office and all I seen was frowning. I said, hey, do you mind checking my vehicle out? I need some repairs done, so on and so on. No. I said, well, it gets hot out here. It gets to about 120 degrees. I'm going to need my air conditioner in my vehicle. And I have a daughter, don't you care about that? No. And you don't ask me again. And if you ask me again, I will be bound to call the authorities. I said, wait a minute, the authorities? So this was something else that was always mentioned, was that if I was to ever speak up, you're going to be taken in. And I'm like, we see that every day. We see that in the Black Lives Matter cases. We see that when women are not protected. So I had a fear of being apprehended by the police. It's always been there. I'm not ashamed of saying that. And so he used that against me. And that particular day, he had been sitting in the office all day, waiting for a moment to do so. And I walk out the office. I come back in the office. I say, you know what? Matter of fact, I'm not feeling safe with you. I'm thinking I'm going to have to move. I'm going to have to probably go stay with my mom a little bit. Wrong idea to say. I didn't know at the time how intense that was for someone who was in his stature to hear. Like, I feel like he really didn't want that. You know what I'm saying? It was like the ammo we needed. So boom. I said, let me see your cell phone. Let me see your cell phone, because there's some things in that phone that I think shouldn't be there, especially if we're not together anymore. And I'm going to tell you, this was the day before my daughter's graduation. It was the day before her graduation. And all I did was ask for the cell phone. And instead of any talk, he put his hands on me first time. And it wasn't a little bit. It wasn't even like I fought back, because I was caught on guard. We were in the office and I'm just like, I felt it all in my head, a two-piece, boom, boom. And I'm like against the wall. Now I'm against the wall. So I'm like, okay, it's over. No. Then I'm getting choked. And I'm like, I don't know what I was thinking at the time, but I fell to the ground. And I just curled up because I thought it was over. And it was not over. I was all by myself. And then he kicks me while I'm down. And that was it for me. I didn't need to see and hear anything else. That was it for me. I was so afraid. I was so scared. I said, what just happened? I was just like a deer in headlights. I was shaking, and I was curled up on the floor in the office in a ball. He took off. I don't know where he went, but he left. And the next day I called the crisis hotline, and then I hung up. I said, no one's going to care about what I'm going through. They're going to look at me like she's just complaining. She's just disobedient. And I didn't tell anyone. Now, this is the crazy part. I went to the hospital after I picked up my daughter from school, and I stayed in there for almost close to 24 hours because it was an emergency room. It always took forever. And come to find out, I had a strep throat. That strep throat was not from being sick. It was from the circulation in my throat being closed. And I just wanted to tell the doctors so bad, but I was so ashamed. I left with the paperwork and I said, I'm going to keep this. I don't know why, but I'm going to keep these documents. It's gonna make you freak out. But the next day, I put on my wig, put on my makeup, put on my glasses, got dressed up, and I went to get my mom. We all went and carpooled to my daughter's graduation, and I act like nothing never happened. I act like nothing never happened. The night before, my mom gets in the car, she's looking at me like this, side-eyed. She keeps saying, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? And I could not lie to her. She keeps saying, what's wrong with you? Are you okay? I broke down and I said, please just give me a minute. And she said, I already know. So you already know, are you saying that because I'm your daughter? She says, no, he came by and told us. So I said, wait, while I was in the hospital all night, he came over and told you all? Yeah, he told us. What did he say? I'm still trying to get through the physical pain. So I'm even more ashamed. I mean, if I could tell you how low I felt like nothing. I didn't even get to heal. And now I'm sitting there having to share something that's so intimate with my mother, who I always try to impress. She says, yeah, he told me everything. I said, wow. Okay.
Valor that beat you.
I don't think he shared the details. You know why? Because I had to share the details. It had to come together. It was, it got serious. Of course, no one's gonna think anything's wrong if that's the only thing you express. I told my mother, I told her everything. After the graduation, we went out to eat. I tried to make sure that we didn't spoil the moment, but I did share with her the physical part. I told her everything from the beginning to the end of what I just told you all. And she cried. We cried together. Because I never grew up in a home like that. So she couldn't understand why I was dealing with it. But I told her, I was like, it threw me off guard. I was unaware, and I'm sorry. I just need help. Now I need help. Now I need help to leave. And she helped me leave. She opened up her home, and we stayed there. But I didn't have all of my stuff. So I would go back to check on my stuff, and then I would go back to my mom's. It was like that for about 5 months straight. 5 months, I was still going back and trying to figure out, okay, is my stuff still here? Then he would try to say something. So it was a time of me really being confused. Because I'm like, you came and you shared these things with my family before I could even do so. So I felt like it was a shot at my dignity. I'm very looked up at in my family. Everyone in my family looks up to me. Everyone knows that I do well. And so that was the moment of me feeling low. The only person I was talking to was my mother. And everybody else was non-existent. It was him. He wanted to be the center of my life at that time. And that is exactly what was happening. I was so confused. I had no money. I didn't have my things together where I can transition and say, oh, I'm out here. No, I didn't even have money for a U-Haul. So I was in a limbo of just being stuck. And I finally was able to say, I'm leaving, because after that I had to file something, because when I did officially get all of my things in order, basically I was making arrangements, getting storage units, having people come and help me move slowly. It was not okay. For him, it was me doing something to him by just leaving. And I couldn't understand, like, this was all created by you. And I'm just listening to God. I'm just listening to God. Like, I can't ever let my daughter see anything like this. Thank God she was at school that day. So for me, I'm still like, it was a complete game that was being played. And I'm not okay with that. I'm not okay with playing with my life in that way. I'm not okay with being threatened. And then my daughter, seeing me that weak, I'm not okay with it. So I got the strength and I actually did leave. And it wasn't pretty. It wasn't pretty because the gentleman, he got everybody involved. I mean, everybody was involved. Everybody was involved. And when I mean involved, they weren't not trying to help me. It was, oh, this man is a deacon. He's a veteran. He's this, he's that. But in the back of my mind, I wanted to drive to that church and just fall on my knees. And I couldn't, because I had to just go. I had to just flee. I had to go. And even when I was leaving, I was forced out of I didn't get a 30-day notice. I didn't get a written notice. I didn't get a, hey, we understand you're going through something, we'll give you time. I didn't get that. I was forced. And I had to only take what I could literally put in my little bitty car. Everything else sat on the side of the house, brand new things. And actually that day it rained very hard. So I'm pretty sure it was destroyed. Even up until the time I left the city, I was being watched and followed. And it blew my mind. How could you watch and not help? The standby was more hurtful than the actual abuse itself, because I thought I had people that cared about me. And it was just status. It was just reputation. It was just, we know who he is, but you better not expose that, because then it'll fall back on us. And that's not what I'm about either. I just wanted help. I just wanted to feel cared for, protected. And after all of that prayer, getting my mind right, leaving the state, I actually left the state. I went through so much hell. It's like I'm finally finding grace. I'm finally finding my footing. I'm finally able to shake it off. Again, since he has such a status, I'm sure everyone is wondering what happened, but that's none of my concern. I continue to promote myself, love myself in the open. I continue to share positive thoughts and affirmations. I continue to love on my daughter. I continue to beat the odds of what I've been through, because I almost gave up, not just my career, but being a mother. Because I said no mother is a mother if she's giving up anything for a man. And that's what I felt like I was doing. My health started to decline. I've been vegan for almost 10 years now, and I have a great health, optimal health. And I had two situations to where I had been in the hospital living with him because of stress. I was like on 0%. One day, one time, they had to put IVs in me because I was not only dehydrated, but I waited too late to get help and I couldn't drink or eat. So they could only put it through the IV to get me back restored. It was that bad. So it's not fun when you're alone, but the most that I could say and the most that I got out of it was that I was able to flourish when I was able to show my daughter how to be strong. She still sees that. um, my family, they're so proud of me. I think they were rooting for me in the background. I just didn't realize it. Um, I can say that I have moved into my own home. Um, it's even better than what I had in Arizona. It's even better than what I had. And I can say that I feel safe spiritually, physically, and mentally. I have a team around me now. I have advocates. And I'm getting through shaking off the shame. I'm getting through being able to walk with my head up again. That's me. That's me. Happy, friendly, smiling, yay.
I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you for taking the step, for recognizing, and for not staying. Now, before we started the recording, you said that you joined Shimmy Mob because you wanted to be part of the Flash Mob and then started recognizing what was going on in your own relationship because of the information that we put out there.
I sure did. And it kept happening. It kept happening like, oh, okay, this is me. I'm going to participate in the choreography competition. No, you need to really look at the information they're sharing. Okay, I'm going to go down and, do the show and we're going to have fun and go out for drinks after. No, you're going to perform. You're going to meet somebody and they're going to share some information with you. So it was all circling back to what was happening at home. I was running. I was avoiding it all.
We don't want to accept it or face it sometimes. So looking back, knowing what you know now, through the experience and the things that you've learned up to this point, what would you say from your perspective were those red flags that if you had known earlier, what was the first red flag looking back that would have been, we're not proceeding forward with this relationship. This is where it ends. Because of course, for you, the point was he put his hands on you. Now, knowing what you know now, what was the first red flag to you from your perspective?
It had to be early. It had to be early. It's like the first red flag. It was when I was told to do therapy. I had really thought I was doing something good for myself. And while I'm having my private therapy sessions in my home, I mean, right after I get off the phone, you're feeling good. You're like, yeah, I'm got it off my chest. But right after I get off the phone with my therapist, he's standing over me. And I'm like, what's the problem? And so I stopped therapy or to give him the satisfaction of being my personal therapist. You can't do that. You can't do that. I mean, it was so traumatizing because I'm like, I thought I was doing the right thing, but then I wasn't, but then I was, but then I wasn't, but then I was, and then I wasn't. And I'm just like, confusion.
That's the crazy making part, right? Having been in this field now for 14 years with Shimmy Mob, I'd like to share my perspective of what the very first red flag was based on what you shared. And that is an engagement after 3 weeks. This is very typical for anyone listening. Narcissistic abusers, they rush you into the relationship. They make it happen fast. They get you hooked fast, whether it's engagement, whether it's moving in together, whether it's getting married. And they put you on this big pedestal. They make you feel like no one else will treat you better, that you are like the one and all, and life will be forever wonderful because with this person, and they rush you into it. Usually that's the red flag. The first red flag is rushing into a relationship, okay? Like into a commitment too quickly, too soon. So that's the first one that I see based on what you've told me. There's a whole bunch of red flags. Like as you were talking, I was writing them down. So I kind of want to go over them just because a lot of the things that you shared may seem normal and for a lot of people, for a lot of people in relationships. I was one of those people too that I didn't recognize a lot of this stuff. Engagement was the first one. The fact that he was listening into your therapy sessions, that's a control thing. Like he told you to do that, but then he was listening in. It was a control thing. And then telling you that he was your all in all and no one else should be, that's another major, major big red flag. And this is also typical of narcissistic personalities, that they don't want to go to therapy for themselves or couple therapy. They say, oh, we don't need an outsider. We can fix this ourselves. We don't need to air dirty laundry. We can fix this ourselves. This is very typical because someone who actually cares about the relationship will take that step to get the help. So anyone listening, if you are in that situation and your partner does not want to go to therapy, that is a red flag. If that person is not willing to get help from a professional together, that's a major red flag right there. You can't fix the problems together because if you could, there would be no problems in the first place. The other sign is if you start finding yourself looking for ways to appease yourself. In your case, it was, smoking marijuana. In many cases, it's alcohol. A lot of people try to calm themselves down and kind of drown themselves away from the pain with other substances, whatever that is. It can be even overeating. It can be anything. It could be anything. Doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't have to be necessarily an addictive substance. It could be as simple as becoming a workaholic can be a sign.
Right.
If you're finding yourself trying to escape and getting yourself in a place where you don't have to think about going home because you don't want to go home because you know what it's going to be like, those are signs that something is not right. Even if you can't put your finger on it and you can't figure out why. I was in a relationship like that where I couldn't figure out what was wrong, but I hated going home. And I couldn't figure out why. For the longest time, I couldn't figure out why. The fact that he wanted to know, he wanted to know all your moves whenever you were away.
Yes.
That's extreme control. You have to, what are you doing? You have to text and not text, whatever. That is control. There's no need for that. We're all individuals. We need our spaces. Now, that's not saying, to check in and say, hey, how are things going? Is everything good? That's different, right? Caring about the other person is one thing, but wanting to know every move and having to send in a report while you're gone, that is not okay. That is control. That is not love. That is control. Another sign, which actually, this one thing that you mentioned, I had a similar experience too. I used to teach workshops. I would go for weekends. I'd be gone, teach workshops, and then come back. And I would be greeted with a big frown to, arms crossed, big frown. Then also putting you on a guilt trip. You mentioned he was offered this job and you said, go for it. And then he says, no, because of you, I won't take it, to found all the reasons that kind of put you on a guilt trip.
Yes.
Making it as if it was you. He never wanted the job, but he just put it on you instead. He didn't want the job. He just wanted you to be the excuse, not to take the job. So he could put it on you. I know, I see your face. You're just like in complete shock of realizing this right now, but that's exactly what was going on. The fact that he went to your mom to tell about the fight is so that he could give his version. I wasn't there. I didn't hear the conversation, right? I only know what you just shared here. I suspect that he went to her and said, we had a fight. We had a bad fight last night or whatever yesterday, and kind of not really get into the details on purpose so that when your mom talked to you, she was kind of prepared and she could kind of take his side that, he came forward and he talked about it. He wasn't hiding it. Right? So they cover their ground very, I laugh, but it's not funny. These are all the signs. The choking part. This is a huge red flag. And First of all, I'm so glad that you're out. I'm so, so glad that you're out, and embrace yourself with this information if you don't already know it. When someone chokes you, statistically, if you stay in that relationship, that person will end up killing you.
Oh my gosh.
Choking is the number one sign that you will end up dead in a relationship. So the fact that you left, I am so happy you did. So anyone listening, because I know there are a lot of people out there in relationships who get into fights where the abuser will choke them. That's the sign. That's a sign. Choking is the number one sign that it's not going to end up well. So good for you. Your kid still has a mom.
Yes.
So, and the reason I go over all these signs and the red flags is that even though we've been in an abusive relationship, sometimes we miss those flags, but we need to know all of them so that we can prevent that from happening again in another relationship, that we don't normalize some of these things, because a lot of these have been normalized. I grew up around family members giving advice to other people saying, oh, but that person is not always that bad. They're a good provider. Well, it doesn't mean anything. So that's not an excuse. That's not an excuse. But they're not always bad. Sometimes they have good times. See, well, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's the bad overrides anything else. There's no balance. There's no such thing as balance when there's abuse. The last thing I have that I wrote as far as a red flag is more kind of another sign of how these type of abusers operate. And that is that when there is the breakup, they use the people in the network to vilify you. They vilify the victim. There's this term for these people, and that's the flying monkeys. Flying monkeys is when the abuser takes all the people around them and makes them take their side. And then these people go online saying things about the victim, but to condemn the victim. So it's basically a reinforcement of the abuser to victimize the victim even more. Very brave of you to share your story. I'm very grateful that you've come forward. I really wish you the strength 1,000 times over of what you've had and having the courage to leave. I know you have a bright future. Your daughter's got a bright future. She's got an amazing mom. And these are things that we need to teach our kids too, right? Like starting with boundaries, like what are the healthy boundaries? Respect for ourselves, respect for others. So it's mutual respect in both ways. If the relationship was abusive from day one, you wouldn't be in it. Usually these relationships become abusive over time. May I ask, how long were you with this person?
It was a span about 4 years.
Okay, so from the moment of let's say the engagement to the moment he told you to go to therapy, how long was that?
That was about 3 months in.
3 months in, so it's pretty quick.
Maybe less. Yeah, very quick.
It's not always that quick, the transition. So he had the grip on you. The fact that he threatened you to take away all your stuff, that's the control part.
Yes.
But no more.
No.
You're out of the grip. You're the example that it doesn't matter where you're at. You can leave. There are resources out there. It can be scary. It's not easy. It can be terrifying. One other lesson out of this is never tell your abuser you plan to leave.
That is so true. That is so true.
You have to plan it safely. And for anyone listening, the best way to do this is contact your local domestic violence shelter. You don't have to go to the shelter and stay in a shelter. They have the resources. They can actually give you a plan, step by step, on how to plan your exit safely. You were very lucky that things didn't get worse.
Oh, yes.
And the fact that you're going back and forth for 5 months after that, were you staying there or were you just going to get your stuff over the 5 months?
I was technically still staying there.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very, very risky.
Yeah, very, very risky.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Once you make that decision to leave, and I'm speaking to our audience right now, once you make that decision to leave, it's important to know in advance that you're going to be tempted to move back, because that transition for many, it is so challenging, and the abuser can make it so miserable. Or it can try to hoover you back in and try to convince you to go back in. Everything is going to be better. I'll change. I'll go to therapy, whatever. They'll promise you the moon. But the thing is, they showed you their colors the first time. Believe them that first time. They're not going to change. Because when someone loves you and truly loves you, they would never hurt you. And if they've hurt you, they never loved you in the first time. So it's not going to get any better the second time. Statistically, it doesn't get better.
Wow.
Never. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you so much for listening and for being here today. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast, and make sure to share it with your friends. You can find the links mentioned in this episode and all of the show notes on my website at francescaanastasi.com. You can also watch all of our videos on YouTube, where you can also subscribe to our channel at youtube.com/Francesca Anastasi. Once again, thank you so much for being here today. Until next time, embrace your magnificence.